Alright, so the current project is going to be a front coilover conversion on my 1965 Mercury Comet. This is the first video I'm going to make of this car, so I'll go over some things about it and what I've done to it. If you don't want to hear the history of the car, skip ahead to... Okay, so I traded this car. It was a 6-cylinder car, non-running. I traded for a Sportster. So when I was looking for a Falcon, whatever I could find, Comet, Fairlane. This car popped up. 65 Comet is a 1-year only body style. 64 had the headlights beside each other, left and right. These are the stacked headlights. There are some other small differences, but it is basically a Falcon. So, got it. It didn't run. I did get the 6-cylinder running before I took it apart, but I put a 302 C4 in it and redid the suspension. So the 60s cars, if it was a 6-cylinder car, is 4-lug, small rear axle. So the rear axle I put in it is out of a 67 Mustang. The front, I just bought replacement parts. They're basically the same as this year Mustang, but all new parts, all new. The steering and everything is different, so all new steering. I've got Mustang spindles on it. 2003 Cobra front brakes. Then once I got it together, running and driving, I drove it for a little bit. Then I broke the rear axle, so I rebuilt it. Posi, better axles. And then the C4 went out, so I did a T5 5-speed swap out of a Fox body. Then after that, I went through the interior, did some floorboards. It only in spots it needed some work, but it did some floorboards, new carpet, new door panels, 65 Mustang bucket seats. Then, let's see, the brakes. I'm using a 71 Maverick master cylinder. All new fuel tank, fuel lines, brake lines. So then the last thing I did to it, I'll pop the hood and show you here. So I went through the front of the motor. The radiator I had in it was okay, but I wanted to get a bigger radiator in it. So I switched to Serpentine Drive, which consisted of different timing cover, reverse flow water pump. Then this is a 3G 130 amp alternator out of a 94 or 95 Mustang. Added AC compressor. I don't have the rest of the vintage air in yet, but it will eventually. 67 Mustang battery tray, modified. The original battery tray was long ways and it come out to all the way about here. So put this battery sideways. Cut out some of the core support and put a Griffin aluminum radiator in it. Dual electric fans. It's got a quick fuel carburetor, HEI distributor. Some of the traditional Ford guys probably don't like these, but I like them a lot. They're simple. It's a Chevy design, but coil and everything is inside this cap. One wire to run. It's nice. It's got catch can, headers, H-pipe with Flowmaster Super 10s. So the front suspension I've had all apart, and it just sits a little bit too low up front. The tires will rub sometimes. So what we're going to do is coilovers on the front so we can adjust the height to what we want. Those are Mustang bullet rims. So any of these swaps, if you're doing a T5 in an older 60s Ford car, anything like that, leave a comment and I can help you out with some part numbers. The Fox body clutch is cable operated, so that made it a pretty easy swap. I'll show you inside the car. See the Mustang bucket seats, her shifter. I don't have headliner done yet, but alright, so at this point I will get it jacked up and I'll show you the front suspension design. Okay, there you can see the wheel off and the suspension design. So it's got a coil spring up on top instead of, a traditional design where it's in between. Coil spring up top, it's got a pivot point, and the shock comes up through and it bolts up under the hood. I'll show you that. So we'll be replacing the coil spring and shock. If I get the light here. This will all come out. The new assembly will bolt on exactly the same, and it'll come up through up to the engine bay. But the coilover has got an adjustment. Got a spanner wrench where you can change the height up and down. So to take this out, you want to get your shock off first, and then we're going to have to compress this coil spring. So don't do this job without a coil spring compressor. You can see there where the shock comes up through and bolts on. So first thing, I'll get the shock out of there. Okay, shock's out. It pulls out through the top. So up next is getting the coil spring compressor installed. Okay, the problem I'm having with this compressor is the screw is contacting the coil spring seat before it compresses all the way. So I'm going to cut the end of this off. Okay, it took some messing with, but I've got it compressed. You can see that. And we're going to get it out of there. And there it is. So you want to slowly loosen that compressor out of there. I had to modify that compressor quite a bit. I had to shorten that a couple times, but we got it. Alright, so here's the kit we're going to be using. Now this is actually for a 64 to 66 Mustang. I'll put the part number on the screen if you're interested. Now you can choose your spring rate, and for this kit I used a 400-pound spring rate. So this bracket here will replace the top shock mount, and that's where this spherical bearing will mount. So let's see if it looks like it fits. And it does. It's good. So that's going to go there. And then we'll check to make sure this fits. This is going to replace this part. This is what the coil spring's set on, and it pivots. So I'll turn a light on and see if this looks like it's good. And yes, it fits. Okay. It's good. Now, if you try looking up parts for a Mercury Comet, nothing's going to pop up. But again, all this suspension stuff is the same as a same year Mustang, so we'll make it work regardless. Okay, first step is to bolt your upper bracket on. It doesn't come with hardware for that. It says to use your original, but I put some new stainless bolts in. You also have to reuse your coil spring isolator pad. So now we will go through getting the actual shock set up. So this is a single adjustable shock. It's got a dial on the bottom. So it has 18 positions. All the way to the left is the softest, and it's got a chart that, depending on what you're doing, it gives you a guideline. But for setup, you want this to be turned down all the way to the softest so you can move this around and get it set up. So it's saying for drag racing you want 0 to 6 clicks, 2 to 8 clicks for nice ride and handling, 8 to 12 clicks for firm ride and improved handling, and 13 plus clicks for more aggressive handling. I'll probably, after I get it in the vehicle, I'll probably set it to around 8. Okay, so the first thing for this is, now it's real important to have anti-seize on these threads. So we'll do that first, and then we got to get our locking ring and our coil spring seat ring on. The adjusting nuts use spanner wrenches, and they do not come with the kit, so if you don't have them, make sure you order them also. Okay, the locking ring goes on first. There's a raised shoulder that goes up. So when you put these on, you want to take them all the way down to the bottom. That's going to make installation easier. That's the lowest it will go. The higher you go up with these nuts, obviously, it raises the car. Okay, this nut goes on next. The shoulder that the coil spring will seat on goes up. Okay, up next we have a washer. It's basically going to act as a thrust washer. So when you do raise and lower this, you have something to move and you're not trying to turn the spring. So I'll get some anti-seize on that as well. Okay, before you put the coil spring on, I'm going to go ahead and grab a hold of the top eyelet of the shock. And we're going to raise it up. Okay, that's all the way up, and we have our orientation of our spherical bearing in line of how it bolts up. So now the coil spring can go on. And just as a note, this bottom assembly, this pivots, so you're gonna, the control arm is at an angle right now, being dropped all the way, so you're gonna want that bottom part pivoted. But that is ready for install. Okay, it slid right in. Bottom bolts, I put a pry bar against the control arm here and slid it forward a little bit. You just have to make sure you get the coil spring centered on these tabs for it to position itself right. So once you have that on, you'll have to get a jack under the control arm and then raise it up, and then your upper shock will be able to bolt in. Okay, there you have it. Install all done. Once you get all the bolts tight, take your spanner wrench, set a height. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, you know, take it up some. This suspension, when you let it down, you have to roll the car back and forth for it to settle. It's kind of a weird setup, but it'll be doing that a couple times to get my ride height exact, and takes measurements on each side, get it the same. But the Mustang kit, 6040 66 Mustang, bolted on this car with no modifications at all. So everything went good. There's the bottom. I'll show you the top. All together. So you'll be seeing this car on some future episodes. On to the next thing.